Thank you for watching the Shakaama live show with your host, Shakaama. I had said to myself I wasn't going to do anything about MLK, but a thought occurred to me of how could I present to you the truth about MLK and you accept it willingly, right? That's how the Democrats, that's how the leftists, that's how the progressives do it, right? They present something to you that is unpalatable and you accept it willingly. That's how the nightly news does it. So what am I going to present to you that's unpalatable and have you accept it? Okay, here's the premise. Martin Luther King was a very out and open communist, Marxist. Now, how am I going to get you to accept that? And how am I going to get you, black people, to stop worshiping him and make you realize that at the very end, he came to his senses. At the very end, he saw the light, and at the very end, he met his death. Now, I don't care about the womanizing thing. I don't care about the him whoring around. I don't care about any of that stuff. That to me is immaterial. What a person does in a bedroom, it doesn't matter to me whatsoever. But what matters to me is that the person was put before you and not the other way around. It wasn't out of the goodness of his heart that he came forward. That's the crux of the matter, right? That he, out of the goodness of his heart, formed some sort of group, and this group came to free the black man from the stranglehold of the white man. And I told you time and again that it wasn't needed, and the ultimate result of it was the destruction, devastation, disintegration of the black man and the black community. I present to you, McCarthy was right. Although Joseph McCarthy was one of the most demonized American politicians of the last century, new information, including half-century-old FBI records of Soviet embassy conversations, are showing that McCarthy was right in nearly all his accusations. Will Joe McCarthy? It was the losers who've written the history which condemns him, said Dan Flynn, director of accuracy and academics' recent national conference on McCarthy, broadcast by C-SPAN. Using new information obtained from studies of old Soviet files in Moscow and now the famous Venona Intercepts, FBI recordings of Soviet embassy communications between 1944 through 48, the record is showing that McCarthy was essentially right. He had many weaknesses, but almost every case he charged has now been proven correct. Whether it was stealing atomic secrets or influencing U.S. foreign policy, communist victories in the 1940s were fed by an incredibly vast spy and influence network. The conference, a gathering of old McCarthyists and younger scholars, commemorated the senator's first speech in Wheeling, West Virginia, 50 years ago, when he first held up a list of names of employees of the State Department whom, he said, were major security risks. McCarthy questioned how in 6 short years after America's winning of World War II, the communist world was triumphant and had expanded to include 800 million people. Of the list, a key one consisted of 108 names from a House Appropriation Committee report of persons declared as security risks in the State Department, the lead list. The House Committee chairman had complained that state wasn't bothering to do anything about the suspects. Details of the list and its accusations were presented at the conference. Speakers detailed many of the cover-ups used to smear McCarthy. Veteran journalist and teacher Stan Evans, director of National Journalism Center, told of the Tidying Committee who had investigated McCarthy charges of communism in government. Its report had exonerated everyone. Among the accused, it stated categorically that there was no evidence against Owen Lattimore, a man McCarthy said was a major figure in the communist conspiracy. Lattimore had been Roosevelt's key advisor in China policy. Yet Evans showed evidence from 5,000 pages of FBI files on him, files released only a few years ago to the public, although the White House had access to them. However, evidence before the committee showed that Lattimore has supported Soviet policy at every turn, even declaring that the Stalin Purge trials in Russia sound like democracy to me. With then Vice President Henry Wallace in Russia, Lattimore compared concentration camps to the Tennessee Valley Authority and later urged Washington to abandon China to communism and to withdraw from Japan and Korea. FBI Chief J. Edgar Hoover, who had fed information to McCarthy, broke with him afterwards, fearing McCarthy would prejudice FBI source of information for its criminal prosecutions. Although most of McCarthy's case involved actual spies and security risks, the really important issue was that of communist influence over American foreign policy, argues Evans. Harry Hopkins, Roosevelt's close advisor who lived in the White House, had regular contact with Soviet intelligence. He helped bring about the disastrous Yalta and Potsdam agreements. The Morgenthau Plan to prevent German reconstruction and starve the Germans to make them desperate enough to go communist was the product of Laughlin Curry and Harry Dexter White at the Treasury Department. The abandonment of Chiang Kai-shek by denying military support was the product of China Hands, led by John Stuart Service, John Patton Davis, and Lattimore. Evans describes other major spy networks in England, the Burgess McLean Group, which infiltrated Washington as well as London. Reed Irvine, chairman of Accuracy in Media, told how he himself had been a leftist in his early career. He had been against McCarthy, but McCarthy's speeches had made him think and start to read evidence that I have avoided. He described how, all during his military career as a Marine officer and later in Japan with the U.S. occupation, he had never hidden his leftist views and later had even been offered a job at the CIA. Irvin argued that real communists were only in the hundreds, but that thousands of leftists such as he all feared McCarthy and had wanted him discredited. Pulling all the latest evidence together was luncheon speaker Professor Arthur Herman. His new book, Joseph McCarthy, Re-examining the Life and Legacy of America's Most Hated Senator, and featured in the Sunday New York Times magazine, shows the vindication of most of McCarthy's charges. Herman, who was also coordinator of Smithsonian Western Heritage Program, said that the accuracy of McCarthy's charges was no longer a matter of debate, that they are now accepted as fact. However, the term McCarthyism still remains in the language. Asked whether McCarthy had understood all the forces arrayed against him, Herman said no, that McCarthy hadn't realized he'd be fighting against much of the Washington establishment. President Truman was fearful that exposure would reflect on key Democratic officials, he said, and big media and the academic world were very leftist, a heritage of the Depression of the World War II. High government officials also feared investigation of their past appointments and associations with people who turned out to be communists or sympathizers. That was the reason McCarthy was so demonized, he said. Joe McCarthy had been a Marine air gunner, an amateur boxer, a county judge, and towards his end, under constant attack, he began to drink heavily. Herman said he certainly was over his head, and his fall came about after sweeping attacks on General Marshall and the Army. Senator Taft and other key supporters began to draw away from him. If Robert Kennedy, his competent and well-connected co-counsel, had stayed on, McCarthy might have behaved more carefully, said Herman. An argument with other co-counsel Roy Cohn left Kahn in charge, with Kahn and staffer David Schein were disastrous for McCarthy. Still, McCarthy's original charges helped bring about Eisenhower's electoral victory and the defeat of the Democrats and key leftist Democratic senators such as Tydings of Maryland. 4 years after his original charge, Joe McCarthy was censured by the Senate and died shortly thereafter. There is more evidence to come. Herb Rammstein, another speaker who started out with the old House Un-American Activities Committee, is writing a book about the Venona FBI intercepts and their links to other evidence from his comprehensive study in Russia of Soviet archives, made available to Westerners since the fall of communism. His book, The Venona Secrets, will be released by Regnery Gateway this fall. Now I'm going to try and get all of those books in the description below. Now there was a statement made when I was a child. I've always been a political person, even when I was a kid. I was far more interested in politics than I was in G.I. Joes. I did have a G.I. Joe at one point. It charged that the Communist Party didn't stay the Communist Party. They simply infiltrated the Democratic Party. So if you think about the way the Democrats act today, they act like communists. They act like socialists, right? Socialism is a program. Communism is actually the ideology. Marxism is the ideology. Now, what does this have to do with Martin Luther King? Martin Luther King, from day one, was a Marxist. He was in the Marxist group. He studied under Marxists. He attended Marxist meetings. This is why Hoover had a dossier on him. It wasn't that he was just some happy-go-lucky Negro preacher that wanted freedom for his people. No, he was a Marxist. Just like, I'm going to describe him, and I want you to tell me who you think he sounds like. He associated with people that bombed U.S. facilities, people that shot and killed U.S. citizens. Anything come to light? He went to communist meetings. He formed a communist group. The group that we all think is just this nice little freedom group, which was actually firebombed by the FBI, not because he was a happy-go-lucky Negro, but because he was a full-fledged Marxist. And they rebuilt the group immediately. And in fact, there was such an uproar about his Marxism, about his communism, that he made a big public showing of firing his right-hand man, whom he then simply moved and rehired again as his right-hand man. And of course, the Jews were in his camp and whispering into him and financing him. So all of this was all financed by him. And then there's matters of his finances as well, being in the millions of dollars. So this wasn't just from passing around the collection plate at a black church. You don't get millions from that. If that were the case, we'd already be rolling in it, right? Yes, we have mega churches now, but back then it was tiny churches, only tiny churches. Passing around a collection plate at a tiny church isn't going to generate you millions. This man was well organized, financed, and a full-fledged Marxist. It was only at the very end, at the end of his career, that he then starts to see the light. Here's the problem with, and this is exactly what McCarthy said, it doesn't make sense. Communism was defeated. The Nazis being socialism isn't a far cry from communism. And having a despot isn't a far cry from communism. Communism had been defeated. Communism had been proven and has been proven time and time and time again to be wrong, completely wrong. We are actually operating under a semi-communist government policy right now in the United States of America. And of course, I was trying to get you to compare MLK to Obama, because Obama is the same thing. Obama is an open socialist and communist, very open, and he associated with Bill Ayers, another leftist. Leftist is the romantic word for communist. It's the, oh, I'm a leftist. Well, it doesn't convey anything to you, right? It doesn't convey anything to you going out and bombing people. It doesn't convey that you think that people should not have access to the results of their own labor. What does that mean? That means if I go out, build a brick storefront, then I go and buy 5,000 widgets from John Smith and then come back and sell widgets in my neighborhood, that I shouldn't get every red cent of those widgets. Although I spent my money on the brick storefront, I spent every red cent on buying the widgets. I spent my money on transporting the widgets. I spent my money on keeping the lights on, the water running, the cash register ringing, the good customer service. I did all of this. And communist says, no, you don't get access to that. We take all of it and then give you a stipend. In the United States today, that's exactly how it is. Isn't that how it's run? Have you tried opening a business? That's exactly how it is. Oh no, well, we don't like the color red brick. You can't have red bricks. You have to have blue bricks. Go find blue bricks. Oh, you can't be in your neighborhood. You have to be downtown. Oh, we don't like your lights. We want different lights. We want halogen lights. Oh, we don't like the stairs. You have to smooth that out so that wheelchair people can get into your widget thing for jogging pants. Your widgets are jogging pants. Don't ask me why a person in a wheelchair would need jogging pants, but okay. We're the government. We're here to help. And that's exactly how we're run today. There is no capitalism in the United States. If you think there's capitalism in the United States, the only capitalism that there is in the United States are those people who come up and try and wash your window and ask you for a handout or ask you for compensation for washing your window. That's capitalism. That's capitalism right there. Unadulterated. We don't have that. Try and open a business. Try and open a business and let the city government get wind of it. You're going to see what communism is. And going to the federal level is nothing but communism. You have social welfare for Wall Street. It's nothing but communism. There is not a capitalist person on DC or New York for that matter on Wall Street. Not a single person. And it was only the capitalist firms, here's another nail in the coffin. It was only the capitalist firms, the people who operated on the sense that if I operate above board, I'm not going to make millions, but if I operated above board, when times get rough, I'm going to still be here. And that's what exactly happened in the crash. It was those firms who were really capitalists who said, you know what? I'm not going to get into this derivative mess. I just woke up. I'm not going to get into this derivative mess. I'm not going to bet against the people that I'm giving loans to. If they can't afford the loan, if they can't repay the loan, I'm not going to give it to them. It was those firms, and when it came time for handouts, they didn't ask for a handout. They didn't want a handout because they don't operate like that. They said that they're not going to bet against their own clients. They're not going to do it. Those firms, you don't hear about. You never see them. You don't hear about them. It's only when a rare reporter wants to actually know the truth that they go to them. And they say, yes, I know what all of those people were doing. This is the new crowd. This is the people who are, they're 10 years old. They're 5 years old. They're in the financial market yesterday. And they're getting into all of this stuff that they don't even understand. They don't even understand that now they owe $10 trillion. Just their one firm all by themselves. They owe $10 trillion. And they want the American population to pay for it. That's communism. Happy Martin Luther King Day. I hope that this history lesson has opened your eyes. And I hope you as black people, the black people listening, would take down MLK. In fact, why don't you take him down and take down white Jesus? I mean, it doesn't make sense. We know there was no such thing as a white Jesus. It's like saying that there was a Scandinavian Zulu. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Even today, if you go to Southern Europe, there's no white people running around. There's some swarthy people, olive people, but there's no white people. This whole Scandinavian thing is a Jewish plot. Oh, you mean that the Jews came? Yes, the Jews have been directing Christians for, a few centuries now. Thank you for watching the Shakaama Live Show. Bye.